السلام عليك زين الأنبياء السلام عليك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. اللهم إني نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم، والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. يا الله، اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I think we have changed the format a little bit on my end. I just want to double check before we get going that at the very least the sound is coming through loud and clear. So perhaps if either someone can give me a thumbs up or whatever means that we have at our disposal. Okay, alhamdulillah, very good. Allah bless you, Shaykh Amjad. So alhamdulillah, and apologies for the technical issues I think we had in the first session. Needless to say that any technical issues really are not really technical issues. They are just signs and lessons from Allah Azza wa Jal that really it wasn't something that was shareable perhaps. And so we will wait for another moment to go through that material again. One of the things that we were speaking about earlier on is that our belief in Allah must be with the attributes that Allah possesses. This, of course, does not mean that one knows the reality of those attributes, because that's impossible. We cannot know the actuality, as we say, the reality of those attributes. We can't. But that we at least know some things about those attributes. At the very least, we know which of those attributes that we must affirm and say of Allah Azza wa Jal. Someone could say, for example, that they believe in Allah, but that for them, Allah is a mountain, for instance. Or that Allah, la samahallah, hasha, that Allah has partners. Or that Allah has attributes which are impossible for him, such as Allah's being a body, or that Allah is in some space or in some time or bound by things. All of this is clearly incorrect. So that's why it's important that our belief in Allah must be with his proper attributes. He has power, he has will, he is living, he knows everything that we do. He knows everything that we would have done were he to have created the world in a slightly different way. He knows all the things that could have been. He knows all the things that aren't. I mean, everything. There's nothing that escapes Allah, as we said. These are all proper creedal points. And this is proper Sunni belief. Now, when we say Sunni belief, we say Sunni Islam. Why? And here's a question. I wish that this was something which could have been slightly more interactive. And inshallah, Allah give us tawfiq to be with you all at some stage. That why is Sunni Islam considered the soundest interpretation of Allah's message? Because we believe as Sunni Muslims that our system of belief and our interpretation of scripture is the soundest. Why do we believe that? Is it because that we have the largest number? We often hear that Sunni Muslims make up 90% of all Muslims, give and take a little bit here and there. No, it has nothing to do with that. As Imam Razi tells us, that the reason why we believe that we have the soundest interpretation of Allah's message is because we believe that we have the strongest rational arguments. Now, this is important. Why? Because in essence, anyone can, if they wanted to, they could just get up and they could say anything they wanted to say. No problem. all we would have to do, we just have to be clear whether what they are saying accords to the Sunni interpretive methodology, which we do B by weighing up their arguments and their proofs. The reason why we have an issue or a problem with so many competing Muslim voices saying things about deen that perhaps weren't said before is not because there should be a problem with them saying these things, but because we do not have significant scholarly force or depth of argument or the penetrating understanding of our sources, of the scholars of the bygone age. That being the case, we object, because we don't have all of these resources right now, that being the case, we object to the fact that someone is getting up and saying something and not on what it is that they are actually saying and why it's wrong. Why is what they're saying not Sunni Islam? Everyone's welcome to come and say whatever they like. We just have to be clear. Is it Sunni Islam? Is it not? And if it's not, why is it not? And if it is, why is it? How does it accord to the principles of Sunni Islam? And that's the function of a scholar. And within this discussion, of course, we have points of creed and points of law. And what's one of the ways that we have to rectify that is we have to really go after scholarship. That's the most fundamental point of any healthy community's sound existence is embedded in proper scholarship. Without proper scholarship, things just don't work. We'll always be faced with problems and difficulties. And so earlier on, we were speaking about this idea of alam, the cosmos, the universe, or all of creation, if you like, and how all of this is a sign. And we mentioned how the Arabic language itself shows an underlying unity in nature, shows the important relationships that hold between various things. As we said, that you have the word for the universe or the cosmos or everything that's created is alam, and alam comes from a root word which is the same word for sign. And it's the same word for ilm. Why is ilm a sign? Why is the alam a sign? And what's interesting, as we said, is that there's three letters, ayn, lam, and a mim. All we have to do is we just need to just switch them around. Ayn, lam, mim gives us ayn, mim, lam, which is amal. Switch them around again, you get lama. Ilm, amal, lama. You have knowledge, you act on it, then you will shine, as we were promised by the Prophet ﷺ. It shows you a running thread between three words, which in the English language don't have any correspondence or any relationship by virtue of their words. We can take other examples here. Sidq and qasd, as we said earlier on. Sidq in Arabic means something which is true. And qasd in Arabic is a type of intention that if you're intending something now, if you were to do something now by intending it now, it's called a qasd. And if you were to intend something for the future and you were to do it, that's called an azm. So there's a difference between a qasd and an azm, and they are both referred to as a niyyah, as an intention. Why is that important? Because what's then the relationship between qasada, which is to intend something now and to do it now, qaf, sin, and dal, and sidq, which is the same three letters, just rearranged, sadaqa, sidq. Because if one, if we say that we are going to do something, and then we go and do the thing that we're intending to do, we can be said to be truthful in that thing. So to be a qasid is actually to be a sadiq. To be someone who intends and does it is in reality to be someone who's a truthful person. And likewise then we see from this that if we intend to do something and don't in fact end up doing it, depending on why we don't do it, it's not even considered an intention to begin with. So for instance, I intend to read Quran tomorrow, for example, but I make no plans. I make no arrangements in my time. I just sit there and think, I intend to read Quran tomorrow. It's that in the same manner that I would make arrangements if I'm about to have a classroom, if I'm about to have a meeting, you'd block off that time. You'd make sure no one disturbs you. If we're not doing it that way, we haven't even set a time for when we're going to read the Quran, it's not an intention, it's just a wishful way of thinking. It's called tamanni in Arabic. Why is this important? Because in our minds, we need to clarify when is it that we are actually intending something, and when is it that we're just living in a world of wishful thinking. And unfortunately, a lot of these times we'll see that, maybe we do actually live a lot more in wishful thinking territory than we do in actual intention territory. If someone were to properly plan and for some reason they weren't able to do it, but their plan was set in stone, but some extrinsic factor came and prevented them, that's fine. That's still an intention. And they will be rewarded for that. But if not, then like I say, it's not. That's why the greats of our ummah, they tell us, ta'allamu an-niyya, learn how to intend. We have to learn how to intend. Because if we don't learn how to intend, we're never going to know how to make what we intend, A, a meaningful intention, which B, can then be enacted on. Very, very important. And so this idea of signs that we were speaking about earlier on, that how we look into the book of nature and recognize that this is all from Allah. One of the names of Allah, Mudabbir, that Allah has set nature up as a sign. Nature displays a purpose. The world, nature in the broadest sense, acts as a series of signs that lead us to the existence of Allah. If you look at some of the books that the ulama have put together, the examples they give in some instances may seem quite basic, but really they're quite profound in the sense that no person of any sound intellect would ever think that if they were presented with a piece of writing, that this writing somehow came about by itself, or a garment which is sewn together, it somehow came about. And the idea is these are all simple things. How about the magnificent complexity of the universe? The fact that it came together in this way, it's impossible. It can't happen. And so the Quran tells us a lot about nature. It's a book about nature. It's a book, it has many things that it tells us about nature. It's a book of signs. We are supposed to look at the world then as a place of signs. But what's important is that this looking is not the looking with the eyes in our head, which is called basar in Arabic. It's not looking with the eyes in our head, basar, but rather it's looking with the eyes of our heart, which is called basira. But the thing here is that if the basira is dead, as they say, eyes are useless when the mind is blind. If the basira has stopped functioning, your eyes are not going to see what's apparently in front of you. Because all we have to do is open our eyes and we'll see that this is from Allah. The Quran speaks to us. It's continuously calling us to reflect. Reading the Quran can never be a passive exercise. Why? Because constantly we're being challenged and asked questions by Allah. أَفَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُونَ أَفَلَا تَتَدَبَّرُونَ أَلَمْ يَأْتِكُمْ Have you not heard? Have you not seen? What about the story of so-and-so? It's a conversation that's challenging us. The Quran is asking us to open our eyes and to see. The Quran is a living thing, and Hayy is one of the attributes of Allah. It's one of the names. Al-Hayy is one of the names of Allah, and His book is alive, and it's alive with the signs that He's telling us. The Quran is telling us again and again, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ, as we mentioned earlier. Any which way we want to look, we'll see the signs. Where does a desert journeyer, where will they look? They'll look to the beast, the riding beast. They look to the heavens, they look to the earth, they look to the sides. What will they find? The Ibl sign. They look to the Sama kayfa rufi'at, to the heavens and how it's been put up, sign. They'll look to the ilal jibali kayfa nusibat. They look to the mountains, how they've been put forward like that. They look down and they'll see the earth, ilal ardi kayfa sutihat, how it's been spread. Everything's a sign. Even the word ayah in Arabic means a sign. The ayat in the Quran, in the Arabic language, an ayah is a sign. I know we call it a verse, but really it means a sign. And as we know, an ayah is also the smallest unit in the Quran. Each verse is a sign. It's no coincidence that we call it a sign, because it's perfectly placed where it's placed. The language of the ayah is a sign. The connection that the ayah has with previous ayat is a sign. Its connection with subsequent ayat is a sign. In fact, one of the Quran is mu'jiza. It's a miracle, and I don't like using the word miracle. I like using the word mu'jiza. It's a more of an apt word. That if you look at the manner in which the Quran was revealed, the manner in which these ayat then came to fit together, that itself is a sign. Because if we look at what's referred to as asbab al-nuzul, the reasons of revelation, and the fact that chapters and verses were not revealed in any linear order, they weren't revealed as we read the Quran, is not how the Quran is revealed. The Quran was revealed, some later parts of the Musaf that we have were revealed first, and then some parts which are now at the beginning were in fact revealed different times. And so what's incredible is that how is it possible that a book which is responding to real life situations in the world, Allah sends down ayat, and Allah reminds us, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ, Allah has heard you. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ, they're asking you about Dhul Qarnayn. In other words, Allah is sending down ayat in response to real life situations. And so if we were to spread out the Quran, if it was possible, in front of us in one continuous page, we would say, oh, this ayah goes here, this ayah goes here, this ayah goes here. How is it possible at the end, it all just comes together and fits so perfectly? It's impossible. If it wasn't from Allah, it's impossible. The symmetry, the way it flows, what's called the munasabat of the ayat, the perfect placement of the ayat one to the other. It can't be unless it was from Allah like that. It's a sign. Every verse then is a sign. Unlike Allah, Allah is not bounded by time. Allah is not bounded by space. Allah is not a body. Allah is not composed of substances, or we are bound by time, and time is a sign itself. If we were to pause here and ask ourselves a question, that how is time a sign? Allah tells us in the Quran, wal asr, by time. We need to first ask ourselves the question that what is time? What is time? If we were to reflect on that phenomenon of time, what is it? Time is just a measure of change. The earth, it rotates, and then it revolves around the sun. This movement ultimately is how time is quantified, it's measured. We come to recognize time by this movement of this change. Now what's really, really interesting here and important is that we are told in our tradition by the Prophet ﷺ, وَهُوَ الصَّادِقُ الْمُصْدُوقُ, because it's part of our creed, you see, it's part of our creed that what he tells us ﷺ, we believe, full stop. And he tells us that toward the end of time, things will move. Time will seem as if it's flowing quick. But time as a thing doesn't change. So how can the perception of time then change? Why do we experience time a lot quicker than, let's say, people did hundreds of years ago, or maybe not even hundreds of years ago, just 60, 70 years ago? It's because if we look at the context in which we live, i.e. the modern world, it's just that the modern world has given us many, many things, lots of things that change. The modern world, if you were to give it another name, we'll just call it the world of change. That's what it is right now. Constantly moving, constantly evolving, constantly changing. And so if we look at the concept of time, and if time is a measure of change, if our minds are observing change all around us, what we're going to see is that our perception of time then just quickens up. Even though time is the same, but because of the things that are changing are so commonplace now in our lives, we have no concept like they did of time before. Even within our own homes, we're not immune to it. We have sofas that we sit on for 2 years and then we change. We have dining tables for 2 years and we change. We have cutlery sets, plates, TVs, obviously, clothes, shoes, and we constantly change even though we don't need them. It's incredible how human beings, the only creation that's endowed with the ability to discern and to reflect in the way that we can, that we fall prey to things that we don't need. Whereas if you look at animals, We don't find that amongst them, and they don't have the ability to think like we do. As I was mentioning earlier on, that if an animal could see a car and were able to drive, I can almost be certain that an animal will never want to buy the new model of it, because I think, well, I don't need it. It's getting me from A to B. What is the new edition going to do that the old edition doesn't do? So what we've done is that we've immersed ourselves in everything that changes. And because we're surrounded by things that change, our perception of the world and of time, importantly, it seems as if things are moving quick. Look at Surah Al-Asr. What does Allah tell us? Wal Asr, by time. Innal insana lafi khusr. Man is in loss. But then Allah tells us there's certain people that are not in loss. Illa alladhina amanu. Now what's amazing here is that except those who amanu, those who believe. What's belief? It's a fixed state. It doesn't change. By time, man is in loss. Why? Because we're just drowning in things that change. Except the ones who zone in on those things that don't change. Fixed state. What is that? Iman. Illa alladhina amanu. And who else? Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. And those who are constantly engaged in the same set of things. The salah, the zakah, the sawm, the umrah, the hajj, the dhikr. Same things again and again and again. Allah's given us a divine routine, a divinely ordained routine. If we attach ourselves to them, we'll be attaching ourselves to a set of things that don't change. Now, and so on the one side you have Iman, and you have a set of things that don't change. On another side you have an entire world that's all, it's become ubiquitous, that all it is that things that change. Now, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, and they advise each other toward the truth. And what is the truth? The nature of truth is that it's fixed. If something is true, you can't change it. If it's nighttime right now, I can't change it. I can't make it day. It's true. When I utter the statement and it corresponds to what's outside, it's true. Can't change it. But importantly, truth, al-haq, is the name of Allah, the unchanging. So we have the unchanging, we have Allah, unchanging. And on the other hand, we have dunya, which is constantly changing. Where do we choose to live? It comes back to what we said earlier on, the paradigm, the frame of being that we choose to adopt. What we can't do, evidently, is say, why sometimes we wonder progress isn't made. It's because what we do is we choose to look at these paradigms, these different frames, and we don't actually take root in those frames, such as a hijrah. We're saying, okay, we want to do hijrah permanently to Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salam, in our beings, not from the dunya. So what we do, we get into our cars, we're living in this paradigm, we drive over to that paradigm and we spend 2 or 3 hours there and we come back. No, we need to leave ourselves in that paradigm, you see. We can't leave it. We can't just leave it and come back from it. That's the thing that gives us what's called thabat, fixity. No? These times are a great reminder for us. We're living in a very interesting time right now, as we all know. Our current context, we see that the coronavirus, for instance, a disease for us human beings. Perhaps it's probably the case that we human beings have become a disease for the world, really. Killing and destroying everything in our wake, plundering the resources of the world without any regard, decimating communities of wildlife, ecosystems, just for the sake of profit, ravaging entire ecosystems and becoming parasites upon the poor. In our hands, we end up killing the planet. Now, but this tiny protein, this virus, is now king of the world. It's the king of the world, right? I mean, it's completely brought the world to a standstill. Now, and so if we look at the irony in all of this, is that we live in an age right now where the world is a place of competing profits. Profits with Profits and profit of Prophets, profits. There are prophets in the sacred sense, those who are supposed to follow to reach Allah, and there are prophets with the Fits, that which is thought, people seek it without any regard for right or wrong, polar opposites. So the question then comes, literally, which prophet do we choose to live our life by? We need to really align our frames, really question the manner in which we engage with the world. Tabarakallah. Now, so the idea that we, as part of all of this, that we've mentioned before, and it's apt to mention again, which is our age is now an age of information exchange. What I mean by that is that teaching is no longer teaching how it used to be. It's really you turn up and you exchange, you pay money and you take information. No regard for the teacher anymore. A teacher is someone who imparts knowledge. In our tradition, it's not just imparting knowledge, but a teacher is someone who also imparts a state of being. And so knowledge is to impart understanding. In other words, a teacher is molding us. And that's why the best teachers mold the best students. Look at who the Prophet ﷺ molded. Look at who he produced. Look at his students. He produced people, men and women. And these people that he produced, they changed the face of the world. So why am I saying this? Because to engage in any form of instruction, creedal instruction or instruction in law, whatever it might be, Arabic, there must be an understanding of the importance of knowledge and the importance of the manner of instruction and the importance of those who are instructing it, which the modern world has completely asked us to get rid of that from our minds. As you know, that the ideal of the modern world now is that the teacher has no say and should have no say in the moral development of a student. That's something that came about in Europe a couple of 100 years ago. And that's why you see in universities, you never truly have a relationship with your teachers. Now, so the part of the qawaid, as we've been speaking about, the Imam so eloquently is telling us and mentioning a number of attributes of Allah. And at the same time, the Imam mentions the second part of the kalimat ash-shahada, the testimony of faith about the Prophet alayhi salam. Muhammadun Rasulullah alayhi salam. That the Prophet alayhi salam is a messenger of Allah. Now, evidently, there's much to say about this, but we can just mention a few things here. Number one of the first attributes that we find mentioned about believers in the Quran is that hum mu'minuna bil ghayb, right? Alladhina yu'minuna bil ghayb. That believers are the ones who believe in the unseen. The unseen should be to us as if it's something seen. Maybe not with our eyes, but with our belief. It's as if it's seen. It doesn't matter if we can't actually see it. And so what is a prophet conveying to us? A prophet is conveying to us the unseen. A prophet is conveying to us a message from Allah. And part of what we have to understand is that everything a prophet gives us must be taken. Everything. There's no concept of choice in taking from a prophet what we deem to be takeable, so to speak. If the Prophet ﷺ has said it, it's to be followed. And so in this sense, there are certain attributes which are said to be that prophets have, just in the way that Allah, we speak about Allah and Allah has attributes which we have to say that Allah has. Likewise, prophets have to have certain attributes. And these attributes are important for us to know. So for instance, one of the first attributes, not in any particular order, is that a prophet must have what's called amana, must be trustworthy. A prophet must have what's called isma, infallibility. He mustn't be able to, when we say mustn't be able to, not that he has the ability to and doesn't. No, he cannot, by virtue of the way he's been created, sin. Yes, there's some debate about whether prophets can sin prior to prophecy, and all those sorts of questions, they are minor theological discussions. The weight of opinion is that prophets don't sin because they cannot sin. And in fact, if we recognize the essential being of a prophet, what we will come to see is that anything that may come across as being not just a sin, but what they term in Arabic, khilaf al-awla, sort of there's a better way of doing something and a slightly lesser way, and you see a prophet engaging in a slightly lesser form, that doesn't mean that that's some fault on behalf of the prophet. Or, for instance, we hear about Adam alayhi salam, that he ate from the tree and that was a sin, or that prophets have made mistakes. Stories about Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, that he looked up and he said, "Is that my Lord?" when he looked at the sun and when he looked at the moon. Shocking stories that you'll hear. We have to realign ourselves and understand prophets are a unique class of beings that have been sent on a mission by Allah. They are not like us. Prophecy is not something which is acquired. It's not the case that you become so super pious and that you earn prophecy. No, our belief as Sunni Muslims is that Allah chooses who His prophets are, and those whom He chooses, what we call bi asli khilqatihim, that because of who they are in the essential disposition and the essential makeup, they must be trustworthy. It's part of them. They cannot choose not to be trustworthy. They must be infallible. They cannot choose not to be infallible. They must be truthful. They cannot choose to be not truthful. They must be sagacious. They cannot choose not to be sagacious. What we can see that, yes, a prophet may have the flesh and bones of a human being, but the similarities with human beings tend to stop there. Right? Tend to stop there. The prophets are of an entirely different mold in that way. So trustworthiness is important as an essential attribute. Why? Because we need to have confidence in the fact that what they're conveying to us is in fact what's been conveyed to them. Because if we didn't believe in trustworthiness and we believed in the possibility of a prophet, hasha, altering the message, then there's no confidence in accepting what the prophet is giving us. No confidence. Infallibility of a prophet, the isma. Again, these attributes, incidentally, are not just because they're mentioned in the Quran. These are attributes which we must, that have been established, even though the Quran mentions them, of course, but ultimately because they have been established by rational proofs. That's very, very important. And as a side point, just incidentally, and I did promise Shaykh Yahya that we won't get into any detail of any theological detail, but just as an incidental side point, that theological discourse, what we would term ilm al-kalam, because the Imam mentions it in this book, and this book, even though it's an total introductory book, it contains a basic amount of rational proofs as well. That it's the point I want to mention is that it's not the case that what we term theology, insofar as it's rational speculation, that is all about just dispelling doubts or countering arguments that are put forward by heretical groups, and that if we lived on a desert island, for instance, there would be no need for kalam. Why? Because on a desert island, only Sunni Muslims live there, for instance, and so because there aren't any heretical groups and whatnot, there's no need for kalam. It's the shubuhat, the confusions and the doubts, the heretics don't exist. That's not correct. That's just a part of what creed does. Another major part is that as Imam Ghazali refers to it, he says that this is a universal science, ilm kulli. In other words, theology, and again, I don't like using the word theology, but the way we speak, unfortunately, is so embedded in this language. And also, I think the medium is a little bit difficult to convey always in the manner that we want to convey. But what we term ilm al-kalam is that it is the foundation of all other sciences. Or as Al-Imam al-Ghazali puts it, that without ilm al-kalam, none of the other sciences are operationalized. They don't get off the ground. So what gives operation to all the other sciences is ilm al-kalam. So the reason why I mention that is simply because it's important to know the importance of not just creed, i.e. the points of creed that we must learn as they are mentioned in the book by Al-Imam al-Ghazali, but also this other function of belief, which is kalam. We can sometimes refer to as philosophical theology, if you like. It is the most foundational science, if you like, for all of the sciences. And inshallah, because in the next chapter, Imam is going to speak about that, and he has some harsh things to say about kalam. So inshallah, that context is important. Now, what are the sorts of things that we must believe in that are told to us by a prophet? In other words, we have iman, as the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam tells us. There's a set of things that are mentioned in that hadith that we must affirm, that we must believe, that we must accept, that we must assent to. And here we see that there's a group of angels that we must believe in, and they are 10 in number. So for instance, we must believe by name, Jibreel alayhi salam, Mikael, Israel, Azrael, Munkar, Nakir, Ridwan, Malik, and the two scribes. One writes the good, one writes the bad. We must believe in them by name. We should know their functions as well, what they do. As I said, this is one of the foundational tasks of us parents. And if we're not parents, then as teachers, when we're teaching children, before anything else is taught, this is taught. Because this is the foundation. This is the starting point. It's the beginning and it's the end. It's not something that's why to some degree, I don't always even like the fact that we have to timetable Islamic sciences or Islamic studies within a secular program. Because Islam is not there to be timetabled within mathematics and English and science. And oh, look, you have Islamic studies for half an hour before lunch as well. Because what we're doing is we're creating a frame in the child's mind is that, oh, it's just a subject like other subjects. No, it's not. It's life. It's the beginning and the end. So we really need to think about these things and how we convey. Sometimes because things are just, that's how they are, we don't think about them. But this must be the starting point for everything. Then, of course, as we know that there's the revealed books that we have to believe in. And we all know the names of these books, the Torah, which is revealed to Musa alayhi salam, the Injil, revealed to Isa alayhi salam, the Zabur, the Psalms, which were revealed to Dawood alayhi salam, the Quran, which was revealed to our beloved Prophet alayhi salam, and then the names of 25 prophets. 25 prophets. Adam alayhi salam, Idris alayhi salam, Nuh alayhi salam, Hud alayhi salam, Salih alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, Shu'aib alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Dawood alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, Ayyub alayhi salam, Dhul Kifl alayhi salam, Yunus alayhi salam, Ilyas alayhi salam, Al-Yas'a alayhi salam, Zakaria alayhi salam, Yahya alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, and our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. These are the exemplars. Each one of them was chosen by Allah, and each one of them should be should occupy our minds and the minds of our children. Nothing should be more important in those early ages, and in fact at any age, than telling our children stories of the prophets, as Sheikh Amjad will lead you through tomorrow or this evening, because I'm already near midnight in Istanbul, so I think it's today or tomorrow, but that in chapter 2 of this book, Al-Imam al-Ghazali says that the way that you strengthen the iman of a child, and in fact anyone, is through tilawatul Quran, wa qira'atil hadith, wa mujalasatil salihin. That you strengthen your faith by reading the Quran, by engaging the hadith, and by having the company of the pious and the righteous. And who are the righteous, ultimately righteous and pious people? The prophets. The prophets are the exemplars, and then those who follow in their footsteps, to seek them out, to sit with them. Literally, Imam Ghazali said, and why is this important? Because Al-Imam al-Ghazali is hujjah. And there are reasons, inshallah, if we have opportunity again to talk about why Imam is referred to as hujjah, but that we know that here's one of the greatest scholars who has put together a fine rational system in so many disciplines. And so here's a human being who's operating at the highest levels of human intellectuality. And he is telling us that the way to increase your iman, read the Quran, read hadith, sit with the people of Allah. Because the ru'ya of the people of Allah is what changes us ultimately. They say, if my memory serves me, about Al-Imam al-Juzuli, that when he went into his khalwa, he went into his period of seclusion, and when he came out after however many years, people repented just by looking at him. He didn't have to say anything. Just by looking at him, people repented. Which tells us that there's something to be said about a state of being. Because states of being are transformative. It's human beings that ultimately transform other people. And then, of course, we know that there's a belief in the last day, the resurrection. It's called the last day because it's not followed by a night. That's why it's in English, Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's the day of standing. And it's a Yawm because there's no night that follows it. And belief in destiny, it's good and it's evil. This is oftentimes a very interesting discussion that's brought up. What does it mean to believe in destiny? What does it mean to take what's good and what's evil and that's already been ordained? And what does it mean for us to then have free will and to choose and all of these things? And my response when I'm teaching in public is always pretty much the same, which is we needn't worry about that. And the reason why we needn't worry about that is because what choices do we really have? If we sit down at every moment of any choice, we'll see that our choices are limited. Right now, I can either choose to talk here, or I can get up and I can leave, or I can lay down on my chair. There's a limited number of choices in any given one moment. There's not more than that. So how many choices are we seem to think that we have an infinite number of choices at every single moment. We don't. And not just that, but it's interesting that this question about trying to understand, and believe me, there are. I remember someone sent me an email asking me this question, and I prepared a long email back. But the trouble is that to get to the crux of where the issue lies requires a lot of conceptual gymnastics. And it's not really. That's why it's important that every community, for instance, the Maqasid community right there, right now, it's important that the Maqasid community has, at the very least one, ideally more, people who are thoroughly trained and grounded in the Islamic rational sciences. Why? Because were there to be some questions from outside, people can say, well, that person over there knows the answers to that. We needn't burden ourselves with having to learn, or because we look at the greats and we say, well, Al-Imam al-Ghazali has multiple volumes on matters of theology, and likewise Imam al-Razi and all the greats that came after. So we almost have this sense of confidence that, well, they must have answered these questions, and it's not really something that someone may be interested in reading in, but at least I know that they've done it. So that's why it's important that every community has someone, what's called qa'im, who stands in defense of creed. And the greater complexity that's involved in these questions, I believe, is also partly, it seems more of a modern phenomenon which has come about because of modern education and whatnot, and the what we would now take to be the ilah of the modern world, the God of the modern world, which is science. And because of that, people are, emboldened to ask these sorts of questions, which is fine. But then, like I say, the responses to these sorts of things are also very, very complicated and complex. And so we should be prepared if we really want to listen to those responses. But if not, then we should know that the fact that Allah knows what we're going to do, the fact that He's aware of our choices even before He created us, that's because Allah's knowledge of what we're going to do takes nothing away from the fact that we have choice in what we're going to do. So I did have a little bit more to say, but I think I'm going to stop here. I know it's probably been a long day. I'm a bit ahead of you, so I think you're halfway through, and I know you've got more to come. I'm not sure how this works, so if someone can help me out, perhaps, is there space for questions, or do we pause and politely take our leave? Tabarakallah, alhamdulillah. So we pause and leave. I just want to leave on a note to say, again, my deepest gratitude to Shaykh Yahya, my brother, my companion. It's a real blessing for a community to have someone like him. I've spent many years living with him, traveling with him, and also met many people, and I can say very confidently that I have no doubt that he is, mashallah alayhi, one of Allah's chosen people. He is a sincere seeker, a sincere guide, teacher. Very rarely have I met someone like him. May Allah preserve him, preserve his project, all of those around him. Those of who I know, those who I don't know, Sidi David, who's here, who I've known, since the beginning days of al-Maqasid, and those who have come after. Allah bless you all. And I do hope that inshallah we have opportunity moving in the future to meet with you, whether that's in Allentown or in some other part of Allah's wide world. And that would be a great opportunity. And we look forward to seeing you. Please keep us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.